So welcome to another Astra video. I have to stress I don't really like doing these videos because I don't really like working on this car. But there you go, it is my A to B car and it needs to be fixed. It's failed the MOT. There was a couple of easy hitters, there was 2 tyres, they've been done. But the worst one is this bush. And that bush is for the suspension arm back here. So it's going to be quite a nasty job to do. I've been warned by the MOT people that they wouldn't even attempt the job. So I've had a little look on YouTube, and yeah, this is not going to be easy. So let's have a go at changing that bush. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the car jacked up and get these wheels off. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the car jacked up. Should have pointed out before I did that obviously you're lifting up the back of the car, which means the handbrake no longer functions. So you want to make sure you're on level ground and you want to leave the car in gear, probably number 2. Also chock the wheels if you want to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to show you where I've jacked the car up and where I've put the axle stands. Jack under that is where I've put the axle stand. See, this is the bush that I've got to replace. It's this one in here. So I've made sure I've put the jack just in front of that on this nice piece here. Also, to jack the car up, whether I should have done this or not, I don't know. I have put it on the cross member there. All of that has got to come down, so I will have to move the jack once I've put it on the axle stands. Okay, so I've now got the wheel off and you can see what I need to remove. So I'm going to drop down the whole suspension assembly is going to come down so I can change that bush in the corner there. To do that I'm going to have to take the shock off, handbrake mechanism, the spring's got to come off, and then I've got to sort out the actual brake pipe and the ABS pipe. So those are my next jobs. If I had the correct tooling, I probably could change this just by lowering it down slightly, but I don't have the correct tooling, so it's better off to lower the whole lot down. Okay, so this is the handbrake cable and I've just popped it out of that clip there. There's also another one underneath the car. Can't really show you that. But then the next thing we need to do, please focus camera, there we go, you just push with the handbrake off, push that ball over there. I'll try and set the camera up so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, hopefully you can see that. This is the cable coming up here and that's the top of it. And you should, if you've released the cable, be able to just pop that over the top. So that's the handbrake cable now released. So I think there's one more clip at the bottom and then I should be able to let that drop down. Okay, hopefully you can see this. This clip here just needs to be pulled out and you should be able to pull that handbrake out. Okay, so the next part for me is to get rid of the shock, but with the weight off the rear wheel, the shock is literally holding this in place. So I've just put the jack underneath the disc, probably not recommended, but there you go. I'll just lift it up to take the tension off the bolts for this shock, and then I can take that out, then I can lower it down, hopefully get the spring out. Okay, so that is the shock disconnected. I can now lower the jack down, hopefully get that spring out. Okay, so as you can see the spring has come out. That wasn't too much of a problem. However, to get it out I did have to do a bit of catch up on the other side of the car. So I've taken off the handbrake cable on the other side and then jacked up the disc just a little bit to take the tension off that lower shock bolt, and then I've undone the bolt. However, what then happened as I lowered the car, the whole assembly was going to drop down basically to the floor. So yes, the springs come off on this side, but I'm still holding the assembly up on the other side, and I need to get the pipes and the cable off first because I was going to stretch them. So that's my next task. Don't know if you can see this. I'll go under the car with the phone so you can see what I've done. So as you can see, I've undone that bracket there and I've done this one here. So this whole assembly is now loose. However, what I now want to do is take off the calipers. It's up to you what you do really at this point. I'm going to take the calipers off as opposed to disconnecting the hydraulic hose. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'm under the car again because I just need to show you how to get this ABS connector off. You'll see there's a little blue clip here. get your screwdriver under there, just prise it away so it's come this way. Once that is away, you can then press that tang down and work it down. So I'll press it down with my thumb, hopefully the camera can still pick it up. You're going to need to give it a good wiggle, then you should be able to take it off. The key thing is, pull this out first to enable you to press the catch down. Okay, so now the caliper bolts are off, that connector's free, and all the cable's loose. I can just pull out the caliper and put it out of the way. Okay, so I've got everything disconnected from the axle. That's the all the wiring, all the pipes, suspension and shock. But before I undo the ones under here, I'm just going to show you this, because that is why it's failed. Basically there's far too much movement in that joint. So before I undo these, I am going to do a little bit of match marking. So I'll take one undone, or I'll undo one, and then I'll draw a line around it so I know where it goes back. So that is my last task before I can drop down this whole axle. So before you undo all the bolts, it's worth moving the jack to underneath this beam so it doesn't fall down as you undo those last bolts. Okay, so all of these bolts are undone and the whole beam is now ready to drop down. Stuck on that far side. That's okay. So there we go, that is the whole rear axle removed. And that is the whole rear axle removed. I'm just going to zoom in on this joint to show you what the problem was. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. It is come detached there. So the next part of this job is to remove these brackets and then try and get that bush out. And that is going to be the challenging bit. So I've removed the bracket from this side, that wasn't too hard. And now I should be able to prise this bit off here. And then I will give it all a good clean up with a rotary wire brush just to see what I've got. Okay, so I've cleaned this all up, and this bit will then pull off there. Now I'm not going to have much trouble getting this central pin out because that is actually loose. Before I remove anything else, I'm going to do some match marking so I get this rubber bit in the same position. Okay, so I've given it a good few hits with a hammer, and all I've actually achieved is basically destroying the edge of the bush. So I'm going to stop doing that for the minute, and I've got a couple more things I'm going to try. Basically, this rubber section will actually come apart from the aluminium casing, so I might, if I can, just try and get a screwdriver in there and get rid of the rubber. But also, it's pointed out that this end of the bush is slightly bigger diameter than this end, so potentially if I tap this down, it might free off that end. So I'm going to try those two things, get rid of the rubber and collapse that bush on the inside. I had to go at removing the rubber, that wasn't going to come out very easily, so then I've moved straight on to bending this over, and I think that's worked quite well. I should now be able to get a screwdriver in there and hopefully tap that all the way through and release the bush. I'll give it a go and report back. Okay, so that screwdriver has indeed gone all the way through. So I'll take that screwdriver out, try to release the bush. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to do the same thing in a couple more places around the bush and then try again. Okay, so that seems to be the method. put a screwdriver through it, break the tension, and then you can actually drift it out. So this is now coming out very nicely. Okay, so there is the bush out. You can see that groove there where I collapsed it with the screwdriver, and then I've just managed to drift it out on the outside. So that went really well. I don't know, the only reason I was able to do that is because that central section came out, but I'm going to find out on the other side. Okay, so I'm now on the other side. This is the near side of the car, and this one hasn't actually failed. It's only the other side, the offside, that's failed. I'm looking at here, and it's a bit of cracking here, and it feels a bit loose, so I'm not going to risk it. I've got two, so I might as well do this one as well. But it will give me an indication of how easy this one is to come out. Okay, so I've cleaned that up. I'm now going to give it a good twat of a hammer here, just to see that central bit will come out. Otherwise I'll then try what I did on the other side, which is, well, this side. Push this edge over and try and get a chisel through the whole lot.
Okay, so we are halfway through this job. I have just had my lunch and reviewed the footage up till now, and I can honestly say it has taken me 3 hours. I haven't gone very quickly, in fact I have taken my time. I tried to record the removing of the bush in one shot, but it wasn't in focus, so it's running in the corner now. But it was the same method I used on the other side. Just bend the edge over, and once you have exposed the gap between the bush and the housing, hammer a screwdriver through, which collapses it slightly so you can then hammer it out. It took 7 minutes.
So now the next task is to get the new ones in. So the first thing, I don't know if you can see it, is I have cleaned these out very well. Okay, there you go. That's how clean they are. And I'll put a little bit of grease on that to stop the rust and hopefully help the new bushes go in. I'm going to attempt to pull these in or draw them in using a threaded bar. Okay, so this is how I'm going to try and draw these bushes back in. So what I've got is a piece of M12 stud bar, 2 lock nuts, a big old washer. I happen to have a thrust washer, so I put that there. And then this fits in the hole. Let's use the camera work. So that goes in like so. Make sure you line it up with your point there. Then on this side, the problem is the rubber bit sticks through, so you're going to need to pack that out. So I've got 2 breaker bars, one either side of there. And then I will put a big socket down there, another few washers, and then I'll try and draw it in with a nut on this side. I'll put it all together and then you can see what it looks like. Okay, so we're ready to start pulling this in. It's got 2 chances. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so this method is not working. All I'm actually doing is squishing the rubber there. So I'm going to have to try and draw it in this side and opposite side. So I'm actually pushing on this section and not the rubber. Okay, so this is the second attempt, or I might just edit the video and call it the first. As you can see, I've got a bit of angle there, and instead of pulling on the rubber, I'm actually using these sockets you can see in the middle of the picture there to pull it in on the side. Everything else is the same. I'm going to have to relocate it at some stage, but I needed about 4 hands to hold everything in place. So I've started to pull it in and it is working. Okay, so that has worked. There's a few problems and it's not quite there yet. On this bit here where the socket was, it's just slightly bent, that area there. Focus please, camera. Yeah, so there's a slight bend there where the socket was on this bit and where the socket was on the bottom. And as I was drawing it in, I then stopped at this point here because the breaker bars I was using on this side are now touching there. So I now need to sort something else out just to pull it in that last few millimeters. Okay, so I just used a wood drift and a hammer to knock that in the last few millimeters, and that has worked. Okay, so I'm now going to do that to the other side, and I might try and set the camera up just so you can see it being drawn in. Okay, so I'm going to try and record it this time. Hopefully you can see the setup. Got that angle, bit of stud bar through the whole lot, and I've got these 2 sockets, one either side there, and on this side I've got the pry bar so I can pull it through. So I'm going to leave the camera running, zoom in a bit, zoom in, there you go, and then we'll give it a go. Yeah, So that's pulling in nicely at the moment. Obviously the more you pull it in, the harder it gets. That's not too bad now. I did start to bend this last time, so I'm just keeping an eye on that. It is starting to bend again, I can see, but it wasn't that bad. Yeah, I'm going to stop there, just try and straighten that socket out. At that point, I'm actually now hitting the edge here, so I need to stop and then lift it. Okay, so that one has gone in okay as well. So the next bit for me is I'm just going to put some spray on there where I've exposed the metal. Then you need to just push that on there as well. Then it'll be time to fit the brackets again and get the assembly back under the car.
Okay, so just before I put this back under the car, I'm just going to go through the tools you're going to need to carry out this job. So this main bolt here is a torque fitting, that is E18. The nut on the other side is 18 millimeters across flats. To hold the bracket up onto the car, again, that is torque E18. Now the one for the shock is slightly bigger, that's E20. The caliper, to get that off, you're going to need a really nice fitting 17mm spanner there, and then either a socket or a ring spanner on this 13 head here. It's a very shallow head, so be careful there. And that about covers the lot. Oh no, forgot this one. This is E10. This holds a little pipe and wiring brackets on the back. There really isn't much more that you need. So now it's time to get this back into the car. As you can see, I haven't tightened this up yet until I get it up under the car.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see this, but I've tightened the other two up and I've managed to align it to the drawing inside there. So I'm happy everything's aligned as it was originally. So now I can bolt this all up nicely. Right, so the next job is to tighten this up, but before I tighten that up, I want to get the axle kind of in a midway position. So I'm going to do that with the jack under the car, and then I can tighten those up. Now we've got to get these brackets back on with the cables. So one there, I should say pipe and cable, and one up there, and then we can get the caliper back on. Right, clips are in. Let's get this connector on. It's a lot easier to do this connector before you put the spring in, because otherwise the spring is on the way. Okay, so the connector's now on, and I've pushed that blue bit back in. Okay, now onto the caliper. So make sure the pads are still in place. On the other side, one had fallen out with me hitting it, and make sure the two sliders are free to move. And again, you won't knock one out as I did on the other side. So then you can put the caliper back on and bolt it up. Now we're onto the handbrake cable. So as you can see, I've pushed it up through the hole, and then you need to retain it with that clip and then loop it on the lever above it. Right, calipers are on, all the pipes and wires are on, and I've just lowered the beam down again to put the springs on. Right, we're now at the end. Everything's been put back on. I've checked everything's tight, and I'm now putting the wheels back on. Once they're on, I can jack the car up again, move the axle stands, and then that will be done.